Amara.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
Super, super excited that you're here with me today. I'm excited about this conversation and highlighting the awesome work that you do. And I think just to get us started as we're waiting on folks to join, giving people a chance, letting the technology pieces work themselves out, I usually just like to start with some background about why we're here, why we're doing these conversations. So at Co-CreatED, we want to be a resource of information for school leaders. We want school leaders to be able to make better decisions about professional development. So just providing a wealth of information. And sometimes that looks like a wide variety of training providers like you who are offering services and bringing that to school leaders to make their decisions easier, or ratings and reviews from teachers about their experiences in professional development so that you can make those decisions easier. Or in today's case, going and making videos about conversations so that we can highlight the work that you're doing on just a more human level and really be able to dig in, dive deep, and highlight this work in a different way. So hoping that these conversations are a great resource to principals, and I'm so glad that you wanted to be a part of one of these conversations.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm so, I just love what Co-CreatED is and what it's creating. And yeah, I think people in schools really want to learn and spend their time well. And so
Right?
having a way to figure out how to do that feels really, really valuable.
Oh my gosh, such a good point. Like time is the most precious resource, isn't it? And anytime we can save some of that for educators, I'm sure is hopefully a welcome opportunity. So
Absolutely.
awesome. Well, why don't we then go ahead and just give your introduction? Just get us started with your one-liner. What's your name? What's your company? And what do you do?
Yeah, so my name's Amara. My company is Hand in Hand Learning and Development. And we help people in schools work together in ways that are nourishing rather than depleting, is the way I like to think about it. So, yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's that word nourishing. So in that work, we're going to dig into all kinds of the different pieces that involves. But I'd love to hear some background, like what led you to this place of wanting to do that kind of work that is nourishing instead of depleting, and what are some of the forms that work takes?
Yeah. So I want you to stop me if I'm going if I'm going off track here, but
Will
I
do.
feel like to in the
Oh, Amara, can you hear
really
me?
right answer.
Sorry, one second. Your sound is cutting in and out on us. Sometimes technology does not want to let us be great. Okay, try
That's
now.
right. Okay. Am I clear?
Yes, we're back. The
All
little
right.
bars are showing green instead of red now, so I think we're good.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, so I was just saying my story kind of goes back to when I was a student. I was really good at getting to the right answer all by myself and got sort of rewarded for that and had that kind of ingrained in me. And then I left school and went back into school as a teacher. I was a classroom teacher for 8 years, and I didn't feel quite as successful as I had when I was a student.
Wow.
But people left me alone, and I just kind of kept doing my thing. But after 8 years in the classroom, I became a curriculum designer, project manager, and I kind of like reached the limits of that mode of being. And so I had a kid. I was just back from maternity leave, and I got a chance to take on some new leadership responsibilities within the team, and I was struggling. That was a moment when I really needed to learn and grow. And rather than the system around me sort of helping that happen and me helping that happen, that sort of like, I can get it right all by myself mentality made it harder for me to grow, worked against my growth. And so,
Wow.
long story short, I I remember dropping off my kids at daycare, running late. I was like, I had just had to stop breastfeeding my youngest son because it was just, I was in over my head with work and life. And I got on a call from the car. My manager gave some umpteenth piece of corrective feedback, and I was just like, that's it. I'm done. And it kind of broke me, which I think I needed, because I needed to kind of step back from that way of being. And so when I did step back, I was just so taken by how absurd it is that a system that's supposed to educate us when we most need it, or at least that was my experience when I most needed it, like kind of worked against me. And so yeah, I got really curious about, like, how do we create systems that don't do that? How do we create systems that hold people and that bring them in and that, meet them where they are and that are there for them, especially in their moments of struggle, and recognize their worth and value, regardless of sort of their performance, right? And so that curiosity led me into the field of adult development and coaching, and also into the field of racial equity work, because I think they're really connected. Because I realized through my experience, I had always cared about my students, and particularly the students that were least valued by the system or least sort of supported by the system. Sure. But that experience of feeling sort of abandoned by the system myself really took that commitment to those students to a different level, and sort of a sense of empathy that, like, wow, like, what does it feel like to feel like you're being pushed out, you're being like you're not good enough for this system, and how you work that much harder, but you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot because you're so afraid to ask for help, you're so afraid to get things wrong. So leadership development, racial equity, I have studied both of those for the past 5 years. I sort of see it as a research project into sort of like, what could schools be if, like, these beautiful bodies of knowledge informed what we're doing in schools. And so hand in hand does coaching and facilitation and program design, all informed by those two pieces: the leadership development, adult development piece about how people grow, and then the racial equity piece about how we hold people, how people can feel included and part of the community.
I love that. And I've loved just, given that I've seen your work grow over the past couple of years, and how you've grown into and through both of those strands, and the way that you and your co-founder really make sure that both pieces are at the forefront of your work. And I know that work can take different shapes. Sometimes it's heavier on one side, sometimes it's heavier on the other. Some organizations need more in one area, some need more in another. And so as you think about some of that work that you do with the leadership development, with racial equity work, and everything in between, what are some examples of projects that y'all have done with organizations that you feel really proud of and excited about? I think since the work you do is more, I would say, process than content, I think people would love to hear some examples of projects you've done. I think that really illustrates the importance of this work you're doing.
Yeah. So my favorite project has been some work we did out in California with a small school system that was taking on anti-racism as a school system, which was amazing to be invited to be part of it. And there was a whole team of consultants with various sort of perspectives and expertise, and we got invited into the work to do the leadership development aspect of it, right? The sort of identifying our own personal barriers to living up to our aspirations to be anti-racist, and working together through those barriers.
Right. I call it inside out work, right? Like starting with the internal piece among the leaders in order to lead such important work.
Yes. Yeah. And I'll just highlight one other project that was actually outside of education, but what I loved about it was, so we were putting together some curriculum for fentanyl awareness for a government agency, and they had all the experts, like they knew what the science says about the dangers of fentanyl. But what we got to do is design the curriculum, bring in our sort of teaching expertise and our, what we know about how to teach concepts to kids, And also we did some focus groups with former students of ours just to say, like, look at these materials, like, do they, what's compelling to you, what's not? And so just to your point, like, I think what we bring of value is really that process piece, right? The government agency didn't have a way to connect, or wasn't going to connect with these students, but their voice in the process of designing this curriculum was so essential. And so having a chance to kind of be that bridge between people that want to teach and the people they're trying to teach was really exciting.
Gosh, and there's such a need for that. There's such a need for bridge builders like you who can bring the skill of teaching. And part of this is such a soapbox for me is the professionalizing of teaching, that it is a skill set. It is a science. It is like something that is so magical when it's done well, and it can be applied to different content. And so the process of teaching and learning is something separate than the content we are teaching and learning. And I love that you had that opportunity with something that content probably wasn't part of your knowledge base before, but you brought your skill set, learned about the content, helped them implement in this way that kind of married both. So that's such a great example.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while we're thinking about like just this idea of bridge building, like I've always thought of you as kind of this bridge builder. I know that some of your and my early conversations were around work that, we call it, there's some vocab around it. Immunity to change is a vocab word that comes up from these early conversations you and I had, or a developmental sprint is another one that I'm sure people in education world may not be as familiar with.
Yeah.
So can you give us some background on that piece of your work, how you were drawn to it in the first place, and how you're bringing it into education?
Yeah. Yeah. So immunity to change is this concept that has been researched and developed by doctors Robert Kegan and Lisa Lahey, who are at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And they have uncovered the way that our own mechanisms of self-protection actually kind of inhibit us from changing, even when we know we need to change or we think we need to change. And so I got drawn into that work because when I, was holding this question of like, how do we make this system really meet people where they are and help them grow?
Yes.
I read this book by Drs. Kegan and Lahey and another author named Andy Fleming called The Deliberately Developmental Organization. And it was all about like organizations that are designed to help people grow. And so I was fascinated by the book. I thought it like made so much sense to me. I could apply it to my own experiences and could imagine having had really different experiences if the principles in the book had been sort of in existence in the settings I was in.
Right.
And I got just really absurdly lucky, and through the magic of Google, went down a rabbit hole and found out that that third author I mentioned, Andy Fleming, works out of Atlanta and does consulting around this whole concept of the Deliberately Developmental Organization. And so I sent an email and I was like, can I learn more? I love this. And so Andy's been a huge mentor to me, and I've been trained and learned under his sort of guidance about this whole concept of the immunity to change. And the developmental sprint is a process that engages people with immunity to change. So it helps them uncover what are those sort of self-protective systems within them that are kind of keeping them in their comfort zone. But then it also gives them the support to make some changes and try some new behaviors within like a really safe and held environment of
Yes.
encouraging peers. And so I experienced the developmental sprint as a participant and was just like, oh, like I see myself in a new way. I can like forgive myself for my mistakes in a new way.
Oh.
I can sort of try things less with a like, I'm going to like get that goal, and more of a like, wow, like I get to try this new thing. Like it just shifted me in so many profound ways.
Yes.
And I just felt like this is a tool that I wish I had as a teacher. And when I use it with teachers, they're just like, wow, this is a different level of professional development, right? Like there are those professional developments that you're like, oh, these teaching strategies are so cool. And I love a good professional development on a particular teaching strategy. But this is like, you're the curriculum, right? It's like,
whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that just unlocks things that are really powerful and like impact who you are as a teacher and who you are kind of as a person. So
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm like getting so excited. I'm like, okay, so deliberately developmental organizations, right? Like when I think about a school not only should be that for kids, like we always think about that, right? Like we think, okay, kids are there, kids are learning, student learning, student learning, student learning. What about the adults, right? Like schools are also workplaces. They are places where people are employed, adult people who also deserve to be in a deliberately developmental organization.
Yeah.
And so like for you, like when you envision a school that is a deliberately developmental organization for teachers to work in, what do you envision?
Oh, what a beautiful question. I think it's a lot of people working together. Like, I guess I'm kind of agnostic on, there's so many different sort of models of school. And I think that
Sure.
a lot of them have really beautiful like wisdom within them. But I think what's different from what I experienced is that everyone is sort of there for each other, knows what each other is good at, but also knows what each other is struggling with, and has structures and practices in place to support, like, this is the thing I want to take on within my practice, and I'm going to sort of methodically and intentionally work towards improving in this one thing, rather than my experience was do all these things, do them really well.
Whew.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the science shows that doesn't actually help us grow. That might,
it's not possible.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're setting teachers up with these expectations that aren't realistic. And so the work that you're doing, I think, helps organizations understand what's realistic and take this like whole person approach that we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. That isn't good or bad. That just is. It just is a fact of being humans working together in a workplace, right? And so I'm curious, like as you're working with a school and going in and doing a training, what could a school expect when they're working with you and they want to become this more deliberately developmental organization? They want to create the kind of place where teachers really do actually feel safe to grow, where the culture supports growth and not toxicity. Like what can principals expect in working with you towards that goal?
Yeah. So one thing I'm learning is that principals want that.
Yes.
And they also just want to survive. Like, education is a really tough place to be right now. So like, growth culture is not at the top of the list of priorities for like really obvious and like reasons that are very valid.
Right.
And so I think what leaders can expect working with us is that whatever the challenges that they feel like is most pressing, like, we're here to be with them in that challenge.
Yeah.
And it's probably not their culture. But what we promise is that we're going to come into the work with sort of these practices and this expertise around a different way of working together that just kind of plants seeds of this way of being that
Mm-hmm.
that hopefully, take root and flourish into something. But on the particular challenge that they're bringing to us, we also feel like this way of working, this way of coming into it with our whole selves and sort of being open and willing to be wrong and honoring each other's humanity, like that actually gets to a better solution for any challenge, right? So if your challenge is teacher retention, if your challenge is like project-based learning, teachers are in lecture mode and you want them to be like, whatever the thing is that you're trying to get better at,
Yeah.
we trust that you know what that is, and we will, bring our expertise and our research to bear on sort of the content that you need. But what I think our deepest commitment is to being with you in a way that makes you feel like you're supported, you're capable, you can do this work that you're facing and take on this challenge, and find a way through it. that strengthens your community rather than making people feel more exhausted, more sort of demanded of, more inadequate, which I think are feelings that a lot of us feel
Right.
in our
Right.
schools.
And I appreciate the way that you're also highlighting principals are people too. Like school leaders are just as human as the rest of us. And there are going to be these moments. I know when I was a school leader that you feel like you're drowning in all of the expectations that are on your shoulders. And, you know, what a gift to have someone providing services like yours that can come in and, like you said, be in it with me. Like whatever challenge I'm facing, you're in that challenge with me if I'm a school leader. Like, oh, that like made me like feel a sigh of relief of like, okay, I don't have to do it all alone. There is someone who can come in and help.
Yeah.
And so from your perspective, like if a school leader is trying to make a decision around either handling something in-house or bringing in an outside facilitator, how do they know when to do that? When is a better time to bring in someone from the outside?
Yeah, so I think I would say there's two times when I think it's really a good opportunity to bring in a facilitator. One would be when it's like there's a lot of emotions involved, right? And
Sure.
sort of people, like, you know, that there's sort of resentment or resistance or something that's going to enter the room with the person that's going to make it so that whatever the message is, there's something pushing back against it from the get-go. And a facilitator can help diffuse that because they can come in and be sort of a neutral party. They have, you know, as facilitators, we have tools and practices that sort of help people relax into a space of learning. And so I think that's one time when it's really helpful. And I think another time is just if you don't have facilitation skills in your building. Like I as much as like I think learning is akin to facilitation, I am struck by how many times I'm in schools and being talked at
Oof.
rather
Yes.
than facilitated. And so if there's not a strong practice of facilitation within your adult community, bring someone in so that you can have that experience, so that you have that sort of example to lean on as you're setting expectations for what it looks like to engage each other as adults.
Yes, yes. And I think, you know, yet again, we're going back to this idea that facilitation is its own skill set. And it's okay if you are a school leader and that's not one of your top skills. That's completely okay. There are people out there you can bring in to do that. Like you don't have to force something that isn't in your toolbox. You can bring someone in who does have that in their toolbox. So, you know, another thing that came to mind for me as far as bringing in someone from the outside is, as a school leader, that enables me to be a participant, right? Like I can be in the work alongside my teammates and be shoulder to shoulder with teachers in a way I wouldn't have the chance to if I was also facilitating, right?
Yes, because when you're a facilitator, that's part of your role, is to not participate, right? Because if you do it, it takes away the sense of everyone being equally able to contribute. And so, yeah, you're right. Like that's another really important place where a facilitator has a role to play.
Yeah. So, I mean, several different reasons. I'm like, all the reasons. There's so many reasons. As you've been facilitating, are there any stories that come to mind of like a breakthrough that someone had during this facilitation, or like an aha moment? Like, what's like one of those like interesting things that have come out during a workshop you're facilitating with a team?
Yeah. So I think one that stands out to me is there was this was sort of a problem solving session, or like a planning session around how we were going to move some initiatives forward. And there was all this talk about deadlines and action steps, but it was so tense. It was so like there was so much frustration under the surface of the conversation. And I just kind of stopped things and I was like, whatever deadlines we have, whatever actions we take, like those matter, but they don't matter as much as like whether this group continues to be a team that works together in the long haul. And it feels like people are ready to give up on this team right now. Like that's how it feels to me sitting in this space. So like, can we talk about that for a minute? And it was kind of like what you said about the breath of fresh, like the release of like, yes, that is what's here in this room. Thank you for like naming it and letting us talk about it, because we feel so pushed by the system to like get the next thing done and reach the next deadline and turn in the next report, but the next miles, whatever it is. But like, we're humans and we feel things, and when we just kind of push all that down, like it depletes us, right? It goes back to that idea of being depleted, and we can't do our best when we're like that. Like, that's just, none of us can. So
No. And again, like, that's such a great example. And I continue to think about this idea of schools as workplaces. And like, we've got teams of adults that we're expecting to work together in like high impact ways. And yet we seldom give these adult teams the tools to do so effectively. Like, we don't help them be a collaborative team and learn how to navigate conflict and how to, get through challenges together in collaborative ways. And like, these are all, they're overlooked skills. And kind of like a tangent off of that came to mind while you were talking too, is like the book that I read of Kegan and Lahey's work was Everyone Culture. And they talk in that book about we're all doing two jobs, right? Like, one of them is the job we're supposed to be doing. The other one, I'm going to butcher this, so please help me, is like hiding all the stuff that we're like embarrassed about. Like,
yes, exactly.
No, I don't want to get caught at being bad at this, bad at that. And it sounds like within that team you're describing, not only is everyone like not wanting to like address their thing, there's also just this tension, I think, that can only be named by someone from the outside. I think it was like such a blessing to that team that you came in as like a spotter to be able to bring to the surface the thing that they might not have been able to otherwise. So yeah, I just took so much from what you just said. I'm like rambling on about all these different pieces.
I love it. And that's the gospel I'm preaching, right? It's like,
right.
And it's scary, right? Because like, once that is out there and it's like, oh yeah, we are ready to give up, that's like a scary thing to confront. So it really does take skill to hold people in that conversation in a way that it doesn't feel like the world's falling apart.
Yes.
So I mean, I'm not out here saying like, put everything on the table all the time. Like, that is not a recipe for success. But when what's underneath is sort of like having such an impact on what's happening, what's visible in the space, like, it can't just be ignored forever. Like, that's just it. That's not how we work. Like,
no, it's not. It's not. And the word that comes to mind again is humanizing. Like, you took what in that example was some dehumanizing stuff that was going on when we're all treated to be like, produce, make it happen, execute. Like, that's dehumanizing. And you kind of brought it back to this rehumanized place where it's like, wait, there's something else going on here. And it's a really human thing that we've got to talk about to be able to be productive and effective, or whatever the case is.
Right. And that doesn't mean, I think sometimes people's reaction to this kind of work is that it's like really touchy-feely, or it's all about like navel gazing. And like, no, it's not. It's just acknowledging that we're more than a brain, right? Or more than a like production machine, like you said. And it's not about kind of staying in our feelings just for the fun of it and for like to feel like seen or whatever. But it's just like, we're just not automatons. So let's not pretend we are. Like,
no. I mean, like, one of my most formative moments in my school leadership career was coming to the realization, based on like a situation that had happened, that there's no such thing as it's just business, not personal, when you're leading people. Right? Like, these are persons. It's literally personal. Like, we are leading people. And so I think that you're setting yourself up for disaster if you're trying to be, it's just business, not personal. Like, the human side, we can't function without being our whole human selves.
And especially, I mean, I feel like in schools, especially, Jen, like, people are there because they care about humans. They care about like children thriving and flourishing and being, being the best version of themselves they can be. And so they're not there just for a paycheck, right? If they were, they would go find a different job. So like, you know, I feel like that sort of, it's just business. It's just business. It's not personal. Like even more so in education, where like it's not actually a good business proposition to go into education. Like if your goal is to like be profitable, go find a different industry.
Of course.
Like, so it's really personal, I think, for everybody who's in education.
Right. Right. And like you said, like, it's not like we need to spend all of our time just like airing all of that out. There's a time, there's a place, there's a space, and there's a person like you that they can bring in to help make that be successful. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, the impact you're making. I know we're getting close to time to start closing out. One of my last questions for you is like, you're absolutely right that being a growth culture is a hard thing right now to prioritize for school leaders, right? Because of these outside pressures and expectations and other priorities competing. But I get it. I've been in their shoes. What is the risk you run if you're not a growth culture, right? Like, I mean, learning's our thing. We're educators, and like the kids are learning, the adults have to be learning. Like, if we're not prioritizing being a growth culture, what's the risk we run and what can we do about it?
I mean, I think we're experiencing because we're experiencing a lot of systems of education that aren't growth cultures, and we're seeing them really struggle in this moment when like so much is being asked of them, and we're still in this sort of like compliance, performance, standardization, right? When those paradigms dominate, I mean, we see the what's at stake, right? Like teachers are leaving. I mean, I look at like the horrible news about school shootings, and I just think like, and I'm not putting that on schools, but I feel like I see a thread between a system that prioritizes performance and compliance and standardization and a kid who feels alone, so alone that they're willing to like hurt somebody to get some sense of like, I don't know what, but
yeah.
So anyway, I feel like a lot is at stake. But like I said, I don't think anybody has to go out and be like, our top priority is a growth culture. Like, no, that's not, our top priority is whatever it is, whatever the thing is that's in front of us, that's going to help families, kids, teachers come together and be a really successful community. But the way that we take that on really matters.
Yes.
And so if we take that on through the lens of compliance and performance and standardization, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. And if we're able to shift into a place of, you know, rigor and collaboration and practice, I think we can get something new. And so that's what I feel like is possible, and what I am doing my darndest to bring into schools one at a time.
Yes, yes, and yes. And what a great thought to end on. It's the lens. Thank you for that language. Like, it's the lens we look at all of it through. Wow. So thank you so much, Amara. Like, I've taken so much from this conversation today about the way we look at things, the way we work together, and some different ways that schools can be doing that. So I so appreciate you being here and for your time today. And on my end, I'll be adding this video to your company profile on Co-CreatED so that as principals are browsing around, they can always access this and get a really deep inside look into this awesome work you're doing. What are some other ways that school leaders and educators can continue connecting with you after this conversation?
Yeah, so we are beefing up our social media presence. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And so definitely would love to connect there. We have a website, handinhandconsulting.org. And yeah, we are really excited to bring more of this to schools and to really, like I said, be with school leaders and school communities in this moment of like really unprecedented challenge that none of us alone is going to find a way through, but together I think there's hope. So
Great. That's great. Well, thank you for the hope that you've brought to us today. And I just hope that you continue making this amazing impact in schools. So I appreciate your time. If you'll just hang around one moment, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Thank you, everybody, for joining the conversation. And we will follow up with this video on Co-CreatED. And also, Amara does have a free resource in our free resource shelf that teachers can access as well. So I'll make sure those are available. Thank you.